The Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, is expected to travel to Havana, Cuba, for the closing of the third cycle of the peace talks between his government and the National Liberation Army, the ELN. Russian authorities report that over 4,000 citizens of the left bank of the Dnieper River have been evacuated after floods caused the collapse of the dam of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power station. And at least 6 people have been hospitalized during an Israeli army raid into Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is from the south. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, in this RD News. In Colombia, several sectors, as well as social and trade union movements, took to the streets in the capital in support of the government led by Gustavo Petro and Francia Márquez. The march started at 9 a.m. local time from the National Park to the Square of Bolivar and will continue into the evening hours to demand the approval of the labor, pension, and health reforms. In the meantime, the president, Gustavo Petro, reiterated on his Twitter account that he will go along with the protesters. The head of state invited those who voted for change and those who want justice in Colombia to march in all the municipalities, not only for reforms, but also for a great national march against impunity. And during the rally against the destabilizing plans of the opposition, the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, assured that people have the opportunity to change the history of Colombia.
For the first time in the history of Colombia, after April 9th, after April 19th, today you have an opportunity in history to change the history of Colombia. We are going to change it. The change is the decision. The change is the decision.
And the Colombian Vice President, Francia Márquez, assured that the people are in the streets of Colombia in defense of the reforms and the government of Gustavo Petro.
We are in the streets defending the reforms that will bring back the dignity of the Colombian people. Yes, we can. Let's move forward. Thank you, Colombia, for accompanying the government of change. Thank you for the firmness. Thank you for the dedication, for the commitment. Here we are with the dignity that has always characterized us, defending the rights of our people, of the country, of the most excluded and marginalized. Let's go together to continue building a different country, a country where dignity, equality, and peace matter, a country where we all have rights. Let's go together for change. Let's go, Colombia.
During the mobilization, the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, announced that he will travel on Thursday to Havana, Cuba, for the closing of the third cycle of the peace talks between his government and the National Liberation Army, the ELN.
Tomorrow I'm going to Cuba. I'm going to something that can be very important for the history of Colombia. I'm going to sign a paper that can mean the beginning of an era of peace in this country without any setback. It is going to be difficult, we all know it. More difficult than making war is making peace.
The negotiators of the National Liberation Army, the ELN, wants civil society to be part of the monitoring mechanism of the ceasefire being negotiated with the Colombian government in Havana. On a tweet, the National Liberation Army said that the people suffering from the war should be part of the monitoring mechanism. The ceasefire is one of the 3 items on the agenda of this third round of talks, along with humanitarian relief and the participation of civil society in the process. The parties are strictly adhering to their commitment to confidentiality during the negotiations. This third phase took place in Havana, following those held in Venezuela back in November and Mexico in March. And after his return to Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro Moros emphasized that the country is strengthening strategic alliances with emerging powers in the world.
Venezuela is building strategic alliances for the economic development, for the development of our country. When we go to all those countries, a week ago I was in Brazil with President Lula da Silva. A week ago we were with the 12 presidents of South America. Now we went to Turkey, Saudi Arabia, three of the most important countries of the emerging world. There is a new world with new emerging powers, and there, in that world, are Brazil, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, three countries that have expressed their desire and willingness to support Venezuela in everything.
In Brazil, indigenous communities have traveled to Brasilia, the federal district, to reject initiatives at Parliament and at the Supreme Court against their ancestral land rights. The mobilizations began on Tuesday and continue on Wednesday, when the plenary of the Federal Supreme Court is to resume the trial on the so-called temporary framework, which recognizes as indigenous lands only those that the indigenous peoples occupied by October 5, 1988, when the current constitution was enacted. A bill on this matter is going through Parliament and is pending debate in the Senate. The articulation of the indigenous peoples of Brazil denounced that this measure is promoted by powerful groups of the agricultural sector, supported by the ultra-right sectors, which intend to expand their production activities into the Amazon, where most of the land at stake is. The Chilean President Gabriel Boric attends the inauguration of the new Constitutional Assembly as filmmaker Miguel Lidín swears in as interim president. The nation enters its second attempt in 2 years to change the constitution that has been in place since the dictatorship, this time with the radical right at the head of the council that will work on a new draft to be submitted to a referendum. In a brief address to the members of the council, Boric reminded them that they were taking on a task entrusted to them by the people and the history of the country, and call on them to put the common good before individual interests. On Tuesday, the president of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, announced the creation of a commission for agrarian security and access to the land. The head of state recognized the precarious conditions of the rural and agricultural sector of the country, which have been caused by the structures of unjust economic models that increase inequality. Also, she pointed out that the creation of this commission aims to improve the conditions of the population in the country. Accordingly, Castro instructed the Property Institute and the National Agrarian Institute to carry out a thorough investigation of legal properties that had been possessed or acquired irregularly. Based on this, the institution created has the responsibility of drafting a bill to provide a solution to the complex situation of the Honduran countryside, where more than 25,000 hectares have been occupied. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. Russian authorities on Thursday announced the floods caused by the collapse of the dam and the Kharkova hydroelectric power station have forced the evacuation of more than 4,000 citizens on the left bank of the Dnieper River, occupied by the Russian troops, and more than 1,900 on the right bank under Ukrainian control. About 2,700 houses in 15 settlements in the Kherson region were flooded, local authorities told to the Russian media. There are currently 14 settlements in the flooded area, and projections indicate that around 80 villages may be covered by water. In addition, the collapse of the dam has caused serious environmental damage, and some 100,000 hectares of arable land have been flooded. Meanwhile, the mayor of the town of New Kakhovka, where the dam is located, announced that pumping work will begin on Thursday to restore the complex. And United Kingdom's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak arrived in the United States for negotiations with the President Joe Biden and future regulations on artificial intelligence technology. Sunak suggested that London should be the world headquarters in charge of artificial intelligence regulations in order to establish the responsible use of this technology. The United Kingdom and the United States are expected to jointly contribute around $1.25 billion to regulate the use of artificial intelligence. Although relations between the two countries are strong, Biden has not confirmed this agreement as it is on the eve of an election year. And the Pope Francis underwent an abdominal operation in Rome on Wednesday and is reacting well to both the surgery and the general anesthetic. The director of Rome's Gemelli Hospital, Dr. Sergio Alfieri, informed in a brief press conference that Francis was well, awake, alert, and in very good mood. Alfieri also told journalists that from a medical point of view, there will be nothing preventing the Pope from continuing with his planned travels to Portugal and Mongolia in August. The surgeon confirmed that the condition addressed in Wednesday's surgery as well as the prior operation of July 2021 were both benign and have been resolved, and underlined the Pope does not have other illnesses. The head of the Catholic Church had been experiencing pain for several months due to an incisional hernia and decided on June the 6th to undergo surgery to correct it. We go to the sports. On Wednesday, football star Lionel Messi announced he will join Inter Miami Football Club in MLS for the next season, putting to rest speculations of his return to Barcelona. In an interview given to the Catalan papers Sport and Mundo Deportivo in France, the Argentinian forward said his preferred choice was in fact a return to his former club, but he did not want to go through the same disappointment of 2 years ago when he believed he was going to be able to stay, until at the last minute he was told otherwise. In the end, Messi can even be said to have done Barcelona a favor, as the club can move on from this distraction and focus on preparing a squad to defend the La Liga Santander title. Their summer will no longer be about desperately trying to juggle the numbers, negotiate wage cuts, and sell players in order to sign one man. Now we move on to other topics. On Wednesday, tens of millions of people in the U.S. were under air quality alerts as smoke from Canadian wildfires drifted south. States across the East, including New York, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, issued air quality alerts, with officials recommending people to limit outdoor activity. Smoke from wildfires in Canada has been moving south into the U.S. since May. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, hazy skies, reduced visibility, and the smell of burning wood are likely, with smoke lingering from a few days in northern states. Additionally, authorities asserted that air conditions are expected to deteriorate throughout Wednesday afternoon and evening. And on Wednesday, one of the world's most active volcanoes erupted again, with lava spewing from Kilauea in Hawaii. Scientists at the United States Geological Survey said they began detecting activity early on Wednesday morning, all well within the confines of Hawaii's Volcanoes National Park and away from population centers. U.S. authorities said high levels of volcanic gas are primary hazards of concern, as these hazards can have far-reaching effects downwind. The eruption comes months after Kilauea's bigger neighbor Mauna Loa treated volcano watchers to a spectacular display. Mauna Loa, the world's biggest volcano, put on a weeks-long show at the end of last year as it erupted for the first time in 4 decades. Kilauea is one of 6 active volcanoes on the Hawaiian Islands. It erupted almost continuously between 1983 and 2019. In Brazil, during the first 5 months of the inauguration of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, the National Institute of Spatial Research, the INPE, reported a 30% increase in deforestation in the Amazon. The president set as a goal for his government to reach zero deforestation by the year 2030, strengthening environmental control bodies and offering sustainable development alternatives for the inhabitants of the rainforest. Likewise, authorities of the Environmental Institute declared that Lula's government delivered 2.23 billion reals in fines for environmental crimes, thus affirming an increase of 160% with respect to the 2022 period. For his part, the president presented the plan to combat deforestation, which had been implemented during his first term in office in 2004, with good results in 2012, where the destruction of the rainforest fell 83%. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StoreSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. At least 6 people have been hospitalized, 3 with gunshot wounds during an Israeli army raid into Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. A large Israeli military convoy arrived in Ramallah late on Wednesday to destroy the home of a Palestinian prisoner, Islam Farouk, leading hundreds of Palestinians to gather in the area to protest against the demolition. The Israeli forces fired live bullets, stun grenades, and tear gas at the crowd. In this context, the Palestinian Health Ministry said at least 6 people were transferred to a hospital or for treatment, including 3 who sustained gunshot wounds. The Health Ministry also said that at least 158 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since January 2023. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni defied on Wednesday the international calls to rescind an anti-gay law which includes a potential death penalty for aggravated homosexuality. In a statement after a meeting with members of his National Resistance Movement party, Museveni said the bill was signed and no one will change it. Ugandan activists have called on international donors to impose sanctions against the East African country's leaders over the law, which is considered one of the harshest in the world against homosexuality. U.S. President Joe Biden, as well as the European Union and UN Chief Antonio Guterres, have also slammed the legislation, warning that foreign aid and investment for Uganda could be jeopardized unless the law is repealed. However, the anti-gay law has enjoyed broad support in the conservative country, where lawmakers have defended it as necessary bulwark against Western immorality.
These are the 3 substantive points. Being is your personal problem. Merely being a homosexual, that you find you are disoriented, you don't like the ones you should like, you like the ones you shouldn't like. Being is your personal problem. Promoting is criminal and qualifies you for prison. Raping qualifies you for a possible death sentence. Additionally, in Uganda, sex is confidential, even heterosexual sex. Therefore, if a homosexual keeps his being to himself or confidentially seeks assistance from the doctors or priests, it will not offend this law.
On Wednesday, Kenya will convert a vast coastal forest where the bodies of more than 250 people linked to a doomsday cult have been exhumed into a national memorial site. The cult leader Paul Nithengi Mackenzie is facing several charges in the Grizzly case, accused of driving his followers to death by preaching that salvation was the only path to God. Interior Minister Kithure Kindiki stated that the forest where grave crimes have been committed will not remain as it was and that the government will convert it into a national memorial, a place of remembrance so that Kenyans and the world do not forget what happened there. Kindiki pointed out the cult's activities extended beyond Shakahola Forest and that comprehensive, methodical and scientific investigations had extended to a ranch in the area stretching over more than 14,980 hectares. On Tuesday, the Senegalese government announced that it was temporarily closing its consulates general abroad following attacks on a number of them against the backdrop of high tensions at home. According to a statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the measure comes after a series of attacks recently perpetrated against Senegal's diplomatic and consular missions abroad, notably in France, Italy, and the United States. This closure deprives hundreds of thousands of Senegalese abroad of consular services such as assistance and passport issuance. Between June the 1st and 3rd, Senegal experienced its worst unrest in years after opposition politician Ousmane Sonko was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment in a vice scandal. The combination sparked clashes that left at least 16 people dead and caused considerable damage, leading to demonstrations abroad. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.